This is Les Williams from the Department of Commerce, U.S. Commercial Service. This webinar, titled Brazil, Familiarization to Export, is one of 6 country-specific webinars hosted by the U.S. Commercial Service St. Louis office, giving you a general overview of doing business in each country. The St. Louis office is one of over 100 domestic offices, in addition to another 100-plus offices in over 80 countries. Our mission is to help U.S. companies by providing export counseling and assist with finding qualified agents and distributors overseas. If you aren't working with your local U.S. Commercial Service, set up a meeting to discuss your company's goals overseas and how the organization may be able to assist. You can find us at www.export.gov. We will have 2 speakers for today's webinar, Margaret Gottlieb and Yamile Bastien, the main speaker of this event. First, we'll introduce Margaret Gottlieb. She is an international trade specialist with the U.S. Commercial Service, and she will take just a few minutes to give an overview of the Commercial Service itself and its benefits to the export partners. Margaret?
Well, good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us in our webinar on the familiarization to export on Brazil. I'm an international trade specialist in the office in St. Louis. We're part of the Department of Commerce, International Trade Administration, and under that, the U.S. Commercial Service. What our job is to protect and promote American business interests all over the world, and we do that in a wide variety of ways. We have 100 offices nationwide in almost every major city in the U.S., and overseas we have over 150 offices in 80 countries. So almost everywhere the U.S. can do business. Overseas, we work with the commercial sections of our embassies and consulates. And the good thing about that is, other than the officers that or the directors that are Americans, we hire foreign nationals that not only speak English because they're working with American countries, but they're also native speakers, and they have an industry portfolio to help you with your particular industry. What we specialize in is in counseling on your company. We try to find out who you are, what you do, how you're doing it here, and what your goals are overseas, and then we help you to develop a plan through market research and market intelligence, matchmaking, and even some commercial diplomacy if necessary. So all of these end up in some really powerful results for real people, and we're happy that by helping you to help your business grow, we strengthen the U.S. economy and create and sustain real jobs for real people. One thing I'd like to mention before we pass it over to Yamile is we do have a U.S. export verification of successful outcome form. Most of our services are at no cost except for some specified matchmaking, contact finding service, and really specific market research. But in order to be able to help you, we need to be able to show to our congressionals that we are providing a valuable service for U.S. companies, and we will periodically send you a form to make sure that the information that we have helped you with has helped you to make a sale, and we report that in aggregate so that we can keep on being funded to be able to help you. So we'd appreciate if you fill out this form when we help you as a return favor to us to helping you to make your business successful. And now I'll pass it on to our featured speaker, Yamile, and I think, Les, are you going to give the introduction?
Yes, I will. I was wondering whether you're going to go with it or not. Thanks. Yamile Bastien is the commercial attaché at the U.S. Embassy in Brasilia, Brazil. Before her assignment in Brasilia, Yamile worked at the Miami U.S. Export Assistance Center. Prior to joining the U.S. Foreign Commercial Service, she's worked for the National Democratic Institute for International Affairs, the Peace Corps, the U.S. Agency for International Development, the State Department, and the United Nations Development Program. Emily earned her MA in International Law and International Economics from Johns Hopkins University School of Advanced International Studies. She is fluent in 6 languages. I would like to thank Ms. Bastian for taking the time to join us and share her expertise today. Emily?
Great. Thank you so much, Les, and thank you, Margaret, for the introduction. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us for this webinar on doing business in Brazil. And I'd like to just say a very quick thank you to Les and Margaret for organizing this and promoting the event. So I hope that we're able to provide some useful information for you. I imagine some of you are already exporting to Brazil, and there may be some of you who are interested in doing so but find the process a little bit daunting. So what I'd like to do today is to give you a brief overview of the Brazilian market, explain some of the things that make this a unique place for doing business, talk about some of the opportunities available, definitely address some of the challenges, and then also explain how the U.S. Commercial Service can assist you in entering the Brazilian market, or if you're already here, then expanding your presence here. So with that, let's go ahead and start with why consider the Brazilian market. Okay, so why Brazil? So for many decades, a lot of Brazilians and a lot of people who were interested in Brazil would joke that Brazil is the country of the future and always will be. But Brazil has really gotten serious about addressing a lot of the obstacles to its growth and development in the last couple of decades, and so we can say with confidence that Brazil is the country of the future and that the future has finally arrived. In the past decade, Brazil's brought 20 million people out of poverty, and for the first time in the country's history, the middle class actually makes up more than half of the population. So out of this 200 million people in the population, more than half is in the middle class. And when I say middle class, I'm referring to a very broad range, including the lower middle class, but the fact of the matter is the consumer class in the country is growing very rapidly. And there are families that are buying their very first computer, buying home electronics, buying a first home, investing in educational opportunities, seeking out tourism opportunities, traveling to the U.S. for the first time. So all of this means huge potential for U.S. companies that are seeking to do business here. Brazil is the 7th largest economy in the world and is by some projections expected to be the 5th largest by 2015. The GDP per capita is $11,462 in 2012, which is the highest of all the BRIC countries being Brazil, Russia, India, and China. Other reasons that Brazil can be an attractive market for your company, Brazil is hosting a number of large international events in the next couple of years. We're currently hosting the Pope's visit for the World Youth Day. Brazil will be hosting the 2014 Soccer World Cup and the 2016 Olympic Games. And also because of the vast resources, natural resources, like pre-salt offshore oil and gas deposits. So as you can see from the graphic in this slide, Brazil's landmass is larger than the lower 48 United States. So it's a vast country with thousands of miles of coastline, extensive land and other resources, and a growing consumer class. Two-way trade in goods between the U.S. and Brazil reached nearly $76 billion in 2012, and with U.S. exports making up about $43.7 billion of that. So this represents phenomenal growth. In the last 10 years, 169% growth in trade between the U.S. and Brazil. And during that time, Brazil rose from being the U.S.'s 15th largest export market to being the 7th. And considering the size of our two economies, though, there's definitely room for additional growth. Brazil is Missouri's 10th largest export partner, and Missouri's exports to Brazil were about $323 million in 2011. And the top industries were coal and petroleum gases, basic chemicals, pharmaceuticals, and transportation equipment. And all of those are sectors that are growing very quickly in Brazil, which means that there's a lot of opportunity for Missouri companies to do well in this market. As I mentioned, Brazil has a very large land mass, larger than the 48 contiguous United States. And of course, with such a huge land area, there is a lot of regional differences as well. So I wanted to just give you an idea of how the national GDP breaks down per region. As you can see, the southeast of the country makes up over 55% of the economy. That's where major industry is. That's where the major cities like Sao Paulo and Rio are located. And a lot of the oil industry, aerospace industry is concentrated over there, as well as the largest population and urban centers. So a lot of people who come to do business tend to focus on this region. And for some industries, it definitely makes sense to look at that region first. But what the graphic doesn't tell you is that the northeast and the central west regions of the country are some of the fastest growing regions and are definitely worth your attention if you come to Brazil. So if, depending on your industry, depending on the areas that you're working on, it could make sense for you to visit the southeast and then branch out to the northeast or the central west region. In the northeast, in cities like Salvador, Recife, Ceará, the state-level governments are making significant investments in infrastructure, automotive, production, and wind energy. And in the Central West region, the state of Goiânia, for instance, is making huge investments in infrastructure, rail, pharmaceutical product processing plants, IT, and other areas. So there's a lot of opportunity for growth in areas other than just the southeast. Brazil weathered the external shocks of the global economic slowdown a lot better than most other countries. And you'll probably hear in the news that the GDP growth has slowed down. It has significantly, and when you compare it to the other BRIC countries, you'll see that there is this disparity in growth. A lot of that has to do with the fact that Brazil is a more mature economy than some of the other BRICs. And even though the GDP growth has slowed, the economy is still growing. This growth is projected to continue well into the next few decades. Goldman Sachs projected that the 5 economies with the largest GDPs in 2050 will be the BRICS and the U.S. And so Brazil, of course, figures prominently in that. I'd like to mention a few things that make Brazil a good trading partner, and it also presents some challenges for U.S. companies. 3 of the things that make Brazil attractive to U.S. companies is, number one, that relationships are key. Secondly, Brazilians are very much like us. And third, that the country, as I mentioned earlier, is vast. So relationships are key. Everything here is relationship-based. And what's good about that is that once you cultivate strong relationships and partnerships and you demonstrate that you really value that relationship and that you're committed to staying in the Brazilian market, you can be very successful here. Brazilians are like us in a lot of ways. If you think about any description of Brazil, it's going to sound a lot like the U.S. It's a continental-sized country with an enormous geographic diversity. It's an ethnically diverse population unified by one language, very much like us. Of all of the BRIC countries, Brazil is the closest to us geographically, but also closest to us culturally. So a lot of our values, a lot of our sensibilities are very similar to what the Brazilians have. And so when we sit down to do business with them, there isn't such a huge cultural gap. And also the country is vast, as I mentioned. It's a continental country with 200 million people, growing consumer class, and the possibility of accessing other markets in the region once you're established in Brazil. But these 3 things, relationships, the similarities between us, and then the size of the country, these also present some significant challenges to doing business in Brazil. With relationships being so important, you can't just rush in and expect to sell your products and then leave and expect to be successful. Some companies, depending on the product, can have success with that model, but it's very rare. What the Brazilians really want to see is a long-term commitment to the market, and seeing that your company is looking to establish significant partnerships here, and that can take a lot of forms. Some companies invest in corporate social responsibility initiatives. Others invest in human capital development, workforce development for their staff. So it's just a way of demonstrating that you're not just there to sell a product and leave, repatriate your funds. You're actually looking to build a long-term partnership with the Brazilian market so that as Brazil grows, your company can also grow. With regard to the similarities between Brazilians and us, in the same way that it creates a lot of opportunities for us to do business well together, it also does present some challenges. Just like us, the Brazilians want what's best for their industry. And just like we have a national export initiative that our president launched in 2010, the government of Brazil also has initiatives to support local industries, support strategic sectors, create jobs, and generate employment. And so sometimes it appears that we're at odds about these things, about how to do these things. And so for a lot of people from the outside looking in, it's very easy to criticize and say, you know, well, this model that you're using isn't working or it won't work. But the fact of the matter is the Brazilian model has been very successful for them up until now. And so I think that we need to be very, very cautious about how we criticize you know, anything that presents a challenge for us. So when you do find that you're up against this sort of not really a conflict, but just an obstacle or just a different point of view, what we always recommend is try to find a common ground and try to keep the agenda in the discussion as positive as possible, looking at the long term. So that's definitely what works well for with the Brazilians, and I think that long term you'll find that it's also effective for your company. And as I mentioned earlier, the size and the scale of the country means that it's a huge market. There's a lot of potential for U.S. companies to do business here, but at the same time it does present logistical hurdles. It's very hard to distribute products within the country. It becomes very expensive to distribute products. Within the country, between states, there are state-level taxes that also need to be paid as products get transported. So these are all just issues that I wanted to bring up because just like in any relationship, in any mature trade relationship, there are some concerns. Brazilians do have some concerns about U.S. agricultural support, our tariff rate quotas, and our anti-dumping policies. And then we have concerns as well with the Brazilians about the high tariffs and the very complex taxation system, intellectual property rights, licensing and regulatory requirements, and of course transparency and bureaucracy. So despite the many points of convergence that we have, there are also some real concerns on both sides. But what's fortunate is that we have a number of mechanisms between the U.S. government and the Brazilian government to address some of these problems. And we consult with the private sector, both the U.S. private sector and the Brazilian private sector, to make sure that the concerns of the private sector are being taken into account. Right, as I mentioned earlier, the IMF predicted that Brazil will be the 5th largest economy by 2015. U.S. exports to Brazil have seen a 253% growth during the last 10 years. The sectors and industries leading that growth were aerospace, chemicals, IT, agriculture, construction equipment, mining, machinery. Every year, the Commercial Service in Brazil publishes a country commercial guidance with guidance about doing business in Brazil and guidance on the top sectors. And this year we included 20 best prospects. That's what we call the top sectors. So if you access that document on our website, it's export.gov, you'll find guidance about 20 industries, including many of the following. Ones that are not included in the CCG do still have commercial specialists covering them. So if you work in an industry that is not included in this list, feel free to get in touch with us and we can see how best to support you. One area that I'd like to mention that has seen significant growth is trade in services. We often talk about trade in goods, but trade in services is another area that has seen a lot of growth in the U.S.-Brazil trade relationship. U.S.-Brazil trade in services has grown by 330% in the past 10 years, and this includes everything from telecommunications, financial services, franchises, education, tourism, professional services. And tourism is a significant part of it. In 2012, Brazilian visitors spending to the U.S. reached $9.3 billion. So it's the 9th consecutive year of double-digit spending growth. So definitely attracting Brazilian travelers to your area is a good thing. So if you work in the services sector in any area of services, definitely consider Brazil as a target market for your company. A lot of people have expressed interest in opportunities in Brazil related to the Olympics and the World Cup, so I'd like to touch on these topics for a moment. Most of the World Cup contracts have already been awarded, but I just included the figures here so that you can see the scale of the investments and the commitment of the government of Brazil to making these events a success. One thing that's worth mentioning is that the government of Brazil is seeing the games as an opportunity to make long-term investments in the country, modernizing its infrastructure for the long term. So the games are important in and of themselves in that they put Brazil in the international spotlight, but more importantly, they're an opportunity for long-term development. The government of Brazil has a growth acceleration program, which is a $550 billion program to build up Brazil's infrastructure, modernize the airports, the ports, the roads, transportation systems, communication systems, and others. Opportunities are still available with the planning committee for the 2016 Olympic Games in Rio. Most of them are public-private partnerships under the Growth Acceleration Program that require that foreign companies have a local partner in order to be able to compete for them. If you'd like information about the opportunities related to the Games, you can find it on our website. It's export.gov/Brazil/Games. And potential suppliers should register with the Olympic Planning Committee at the website listed here at the bottom of this slide. The Olympic Committee, or the Planning Committee, is making significant investments. These are some of the items that the committee is seeking to purchase for the Olympic Games. And don't think that it's only large firms that can qualify. If your company specializes in one of these areas, it's definitely worth your while to register and compete for them. Just as one example, there is a small U.S. firm from Malvern, Pennsylvania that placed a bid to design the first golf course to be used in the Olympics in over 100 years. It was a very competitive bidding process, but the company won, and it distinguished itself because of its green building practices, sustainability practices, and its commitment to moving to Rio to participate in the day-to-day construction while that was going on. So the selection committee was very impressed by that and said that they were impressed with not only their commitment to working in Brazil, but also that they designed a golf course that met the long-term needs of the planning committee, which was that it could be used by elite players during the games, but then afterwards it could also be used by amateur players as the sport grows in Brazil. So there's definitely opportunity even for small and medium companies to compete for these contracts. You see this I already had in the earlier slide about the World Cup investments. So very generally, I'm sure you've heard from a lot of people who work here that doing business in Brazil is very complex. There are a lot of legal issues to consider. There are the labor laws, taxation, tariffs, duties, customs, local content requirements, and of course the language difference. It's always important to have interpreters in your meetings, in your business meetings. Even if you meet someone who speaks English, they may speak English well in a social setting but not be comfortable enough to have a business meeting in English. So it is always helpful to have an interpreter. And if you don't have an interpreter, if you do need to revert to a foreign language, it's better to revert to English than to revert to Spanish. I think that that's something that the Brazilians appreciate. They prefer that. Because of the complexity of doing business in Brazil and the language requirement, we always advise U.S. companies to focus on finding a local agent or distributor or a local company that can represent your company in this market. Your local representative will have will be your eyes and ears on the ground. They'll be listening for new opportunities. They'll be making contacts for you. And we can assist you in identifying a potential representative or agent. And I'll explain more about those services in a moment. Brazil is definitely a unique market. It has its own industry that for a long time was able to grow and develop just focusing on the domestic market. It has a huge domestic market. And because of that, there was a very inward focus for a long time. However, right now, what Brazilian industry and what Brazilian government is recognizing is that the model that allowed Brazil to grow over the last few decades is not necessarily the model that's going to take it to where it wants to be long-term in the future. And so the government is using public spending to stimulate local industry, especially in the high-tech industries. And so partnering with a domestic company will help you to make sales in the Brazilian market, especially if you're seeking to sell to the government, whether it's the federal government or state or local government. So when you're doing business, you're focused on establishing partnerships and always trying to identify what's mutually beneficial for your company as well as for your local Brazilian partner. And you also want to demonstrate your long-term commitment to the market, demonstrate your long-term commitment to human capital development, whether it's bringing specialists to the U.S. for training with your company or sending a specialist from your company to Brazil for training your local staff. So those are all ways that you can demonstrate that. We help U.S. companies do business in Brazil, and in 2012 we helped thousands of companies to make sales here and establish partnerships here. Of these, 477 of them reported their sales to us. And of those, 392 were small or medium enterprises. So as complex as the market is, the fact of the matter is small and medium companies are succeeding here. So we have some figures from the Census Bureau that I wanted to share with you just to demonstrate how much success small and medium companies are having here. In 2010, 16,440 small and medium enterprises exported from the U.S. to Brazil. And so this is above and beyond the ones that the commercial service helps. So that represented 89% of all known U.S. companies exporting to the Brazilian market. These SMEs exported $9.4 billion in merchandise to Brazil in 2010. We don't have more recent figures yet from the Census Bureau, but if this category follows the growth that's been happening in all other areas of our trade relationships, and we have every reason to believe that it does, we can estimate that this has also grown very significantly in the last couple of years. So I'd like to explain a little bit about our services. Margaret explained some about what we do on the U.S. side, and I'll just very briefly go over some of the services that we offer to you on the ground in Brazil. Our mission is to connect you to business opportunities around the world, and here in Brazil, the way that we do that is through trade leads, trade missions, buyer delegations, and one-on-one meetings with potential buyers and partners. We have offices throughout the U.S. and in 80 countries around the world, and you can find all of our locations listed on our website, export.gov. What we do is open doors for you and to connect you to potential buyers and business partners abroad. But before we do that, working with your local U.S. Export Assistance Center, we can work with you to assess your export readiness, provide training and counseling services, help you to identify the right markets for your company's product or service, help you with market research, and then help you to implement your export plan. We work in most countries, but here specifically in Brazil, we provide trade counseling. So when a company is visiting Brazil, even if they haven't signed up for a service with us, we're happy to meet with you and brief you on the market and counsel your company on how to be successful here. We provide market intelligence and trade leads in a variety of sectors. We do business matchmaking, whether it's one-on-one appointments with potential buyers or potential distributors or representatives, or even contact lists and international partner searches. We can help you with that as well. And another area where we're very active is commercial diplomacy for companies that are seeking to sell their products to the Brazilian government. So what we do is advocate for your product and advocate for your company to the government. The Gold Key service is one of our most important services and probably the one that we use the most here for U.S. companies. We always recommend the Gold Key service because, as I had mentioned earlier, relationships are so important in being successful in the business in the market here. And so having face-to-face meetings, whether it's with the government of Brazil or with a potential partner, is always very important. You might be able to establish your initial contact by email or phone, but before you can really seal the deal, sign the contract, all of that, it really is important to meet face-to-face. So that's what the Gold Key service allows you to do. So it's a customized schedule of appointments with pre-screened companies that we set up for you, and we can do that in any of the cities where we have offices. And if you're not able to travel to Brazil but you still want to get started here, we have another service that's very similar but doesn't include the face-to-face meetings, and it's the International Partner Search, where we send you a pre-screened list of potential partners that you can contact on your own to see whether they would be interested in your product. And in addition to that, if you found someone who's a potential buyer for your product or a potential partner for you, but you want to do some background research on the company to really make sure that it's a viable company and is it a legitimate company, then we can also help you with that. We have a service called the International Company Profile, where we research the company's background, find some information about the company's principles and whether they have any outstanding legal issues or financial obligations that they haven't met, just so that you can make your business decisions based on sound information. So in addition to these services, we also have trade missions and buyer delegations, and that kind of makes up the core of what we do with our work for connecting U.S. companies with potential buyers. So in addition to that, we have a service called Advocacy that allows us to advocate for U.S. companies that are bidding on major projects with the Brazilian government. And so it's a separate application process that the companies submit to our headquarters, and the advocacy applications are reviewed not just by Department of Commerce headquarters, but also by other U.S. government agencies. And once it's approved, then we work with the company to establish an advocacy strategy. Who would be the right decision makers to speak to? What's going to be the most effective way of conveying our message to that decision maker about why this product or why this company's product would be the right one for them to choose, and why we would want them to have a transparent selection process. So if your company is bidding on a public tender, please contact us about advocacy support so that we can advocate on behalf of your company. We also receive a number of trade missions from around the U.S. Some of these trade missions are regional or state, governor-led or led by mayors. We also have some that are sectorally focused or sectorally divided. So we had, for instance, a green building trade mission. We had an architecture trade mission. Others are specifically for the oil and gas industry. So we have a number of trade missions, and on our website we have a list of all of our trade events. So you can always see whether there are any of them that fit your profile and fit your needs so that you can participate in those. In addition to the trade missions that we receive, missions coming from the U.S. to Brazil, we also recruit and lead what we call international buyer programs. These are buyer delegations from Brazil that we take to the U.S. to participate in trade shows. So on this slide we list some of the trade shows that we led buyer delegations to participate in 2012. So it's everything from food to cosmetics to medical, construction, agriculture, you name it. And in 2013, we're leading even more buyer delegations to the U.S., and increasing the number of sectors that we're covering in that. So you see here the list of the IBPs, the International Buyer Programs, that have been approved for 2013, as well as a list of some of the trade missions that we'll be hosting this year, or that we have already started hosting, that we'll be hosting before the end of the year. Several states have representative offices in Brazil that help to facilitate trade relationships between that state and Brazil. Missouri is one of the states, and we work very closely with these offices whenever we organize trade missions, and we look forward to working with your companies and your state's office in Brazil. The Commercial Service has 5 offices in Brazil, one in Belo Horizonte that focuses on the mining industry and agriculture, Brasilia that focuses on sales to the government, Recife, which covers the entire northeast region of the country, and Rio de Janeiro that has a strong focus on infrastructure and oil and gas, and São Paulo that is industry in general, but also with a focus on aerospace. All of these offices cover all industries, but what I mentioned was just some of the sectoral areas that they really specialize in. If you're interested in doing business in a city other than the ones listed here, so we do have contacts throughout the entire country through the network of American Chambers of Commerce and consular representatives that are set up throughout the country. So we're happy to help you to set up appointments and research potential partners, even if it's in a city other than where we have an office. So this is my contact information and our webpage, export.gov/Brazil. We're happy to connect with you at any time that you have questions, and I'll open up the floor now for questions and answers if anyone has any. Thank you.
Thank you, Yamli. At this point, I'd like to invite Margaret back to lead the question and answer portion of this program. Margaret, do we have any questions?
Yamli, when you, at the beginning of your presentation, you had a map, if you will, of some regions and their the industries that were in that region. And one of the questions is what about the southern region?
Okay, the southern region of Brazil. The southern region is fairly well developed. There's a lot of agriculture that has been very successful in that region. There are a couple of cities in the south, like Porto Alegre, Rio Grande do Sul, in the state of Rio Grande do Sul, that are very well developed. But even so, in the interior of the country, there is still a lot of push to develop the infrastructure and develop industry there. Some of the states throughout Brazil have developed incentives for companies to invest there, and the southern region is one of the states that has been investing very heavily in that to try to attract more industry there. So even though we don't currently have an office in Rio Grande do Sul, in the southernmost state of the country, we are planning to open a consulate there. And in the meantime, we do have a consular representative who covers that area. So anyone who is interested in doing business in the southern part of the country is welcome to contact us, and we can put you in touch with potential buyers over there.
Yamli, can you address the time difference in Brazil? And I guess that relates. I guess it depends on where you are in the United States, but can you the time difference?
Oh, sure. It changes throughout the year because just like we have daylight savings, Brazil also has daylight savings, and Brazil is in the southern hemisphere, and so when the U.S. is having summer, Brazil is having winter. So right now we have a 1 hour time difference. Brazil is 1 hour ahead of Eastern time zone, of the Eastern time zone. So 2 hours ahead of Central, where St. Louis is. As the U.S. goes to daylight savings and moves forward, when the U.S. springs forward, Brazil springs back. So then the gap in the time difference becomes up to 3 hours because of that. So it does change a little bit throughout the year, but it's never more than 3 hours time difference between Brazil and the East Coast. So that would be maximum 4 hours time difference with the central zone.
Are there any political issues that people have to be concerned with at this time in doing business with Brazil?
Political issues, well, one of them is, as I had mentioned earlier, the government is really focusing on using public spending to stimulate the local economy. And so if a company really wants to sell, let's say for a major public tender, it's not enough to say that your product is the most advanced or the most innovative or the most effective. You also need to get the political support for your product, and the only way to do that is to show that you're partnering with another company, you're partnering with a local company, you're helping to develop local industry, and you're making a long-term investment in the long-term development of a strategic industry in Brazil. And it seems like, you would think, okay, maybe that's not that important, but it really is because, this is the message that I hear, from the very highest levels of the Brazilian government when we meet with them. When we talk to them about, this product that's coming from the U.S. is the most innovative, the most effective, and they say, that's wonderful, but in addition to having a great product, we also want to make sure that we are helping Brazil to develop great products as well. And so building political support for your products by demonstrating that long-term commitment is very important. For those of you who have been following the news recently in Brazil, you probably read a lot about the recent demonstrations that happened throughout the country during the Confederations Cup. These demonstrations were really about expectations, I think you could say. Brazil has grown a lot in the last couple of decades. People have reached a level, just across the board, have reached a level where there are so many fewer people in abject poverty, but at the same time, even though people are in, let's say, the lower middle class, there's still a significant tax burden on an individual consumer, individual citizens. And so they've reached the point where they're now demanding more and better services from the Brazilian government. And so that was really what a lot of these demonstrations were about. A lot of it was also demanding more transparency in government processes, greater attention to corruption issues. So these are all important issues for people doing business in Brazil to be aware of. They aren't necessarily issues that, coming in and unless you're making a long-term investment in the country, like establishing a manufacturing facility or something like that here, that you probably aren't going to have a big impact on those areas. But just letting people know that you're aware of these issues and that you're kind of current on what the population is sort of pressing for. I think that goes a long way in developing your relationships with your potential Brazilian partners. I would say that those are probably the main political issues to look for. One other one that I would like to mention is education. When you look at how much Brazil has grown and developed over the last couple of decades, it's reached a great point. But then when you think about where Brazil wants to go in the future, there are constraints. And one of the main constraints is infrastructure. The other main constraint is education. Brazil needs the workforce that is going to be able to work in a high-tech economy in the future, that's going to be able to work in a knowledge economy in the future. And so President Rousseff has made a commitment to send 101,000 Brazilian students to study abroad in the science and technology, engineering, and math fields. And so U.S. companies that support that initiative, that can go a really long way over here. If, for instance, your company offers an internship in the U.S. for Brazilian students that have gone to the U.S. to study engineering, for instance, and you're able to offer a really substantive, hands-on engineering internship for a student who will then go back to Brazil and bring those skills, that knowledge with them. That goes a really long way. So I would say anything that you can do to demonstrate your commitment to Brazil's education, human capital development is also really important to demonstrate.
Thank you. What are the safety issues while visiting Brazil? Of course, there are always rumors and stories about different things, but what do you see as some of the things that people might need to do or be aware of in order to have a safe trip?
Right. Okay, that's a very good question. A lot of the issues that people had been hearing about in the past about how unsafe some cities, such as Rio, are, because of the favelas or the slums. A lot of that is being addressed. A lot of the slums have been pacified. They've been, the police now has control of these areas, and so it's a very different city now than it was maybe 10 years ago. That said, there is still petty crime. I mean, and just like you would be careful anywhere in any major city, you do need to be very cautious over here. So if you're traveling to São Paulo or to Rio, there are some neighborhoods that you would just want to avoid. And then, not walking out with expensive electronics, walking around with a laptop bag, like something that very obviously has expensive electronics, and, wearing a watch that grabs a lot of attention, that kind of thing. Not driving in a flashy car. If you're going to rent a car, just getting something really basic, and that's not going to call a lot of attention to yourself. So I think a lot of it is just kind of your basic safety precautions that you would take anywhere. We definitely encourage U.S. citizens to register with the U.S. Embassy when they visit Brazil. You can register on the U.S. Embassy website, just so that we're aware, and if there is any sort of major security incident in the city where you're visiting, you can receive email alerts about that. But for the most part, if you're traveling to Brasilia, it's a very safe city. São Paulo and Rio, in the main areas where you would be going to do business, those are definitely much safer than they had been in recent years. And so, just kind of your basic precautions that you would take in any major city.
Thank you. Operator, are there any live questions in the queue?
Still no questions at this time.
I have some more from the Q&A box. This goes back, Emily, to the time zones, and we have a kind of a more of a statement than a question, that there are 3 time zones across Brazil, but one of them is predominant. So can you address that?
Sure. The one that's predominant is the time zone, the time difference that I had mentioned. In the northeast of Brazil time zone, they don't spring forward and fall back the way that we do. So there, the time zone does not change. But as the U.S. changes its time zone, there will be a gap of up to 1 hour. No, up to 2 hours, excuse me. But for the most part, like São Paulo, Rio, Brasilia, the southern part of the country, that will be in the time zone that I had mentioned, which is right now 1 hour ahead of Eastern, 2 hours ahead of Central, and later in the year goes up to 3 hours time difference for the East Coast, 4 hours time difference for Central.
Thank you. Another question was, what is the proper way to do a greeting in Brazil with a business person that you've not ever met?
Okay. First of all, you'll find that the Brazilians are very warm people. They're very They're very friendly and want to establish a relationship with you before they do business with you. So if you've never met the person, but maybe you've had some contact by email or by phone, definitely handshake is always effective. If you've had some, like more contact by phone or by email, then a handshake that also goes to a hug is always welcome. In some cities, people will do two kisses if it's like a man and a woman or two women meeting. So it's like two kisses, like right cheek and left cheek. In Sao Paulo, it's only one kiss. And a lot of times what will happen is, like, let's say you've had your first meeting and you're just shaking hands as you say hello. Before you get down to business, take some time to just chat with the person. Ask them how they're doing, how's their family, how long have they lived there, are they from there originally, where are they from originally, that kind of thing. Have they been to the U.S. before? Did they like their visit to the U.S., that kind of thing. Just kind of establish a rapport before you get straight to business. A lot of Brazilians find that Americans can be kind of abrupt in, starting the conversation and just getting straight to business. So, take some time to do that before you get into the business discussion. If your first meeting is going to be over lunch, then definitely, draw out the more personal side of it before you get into business. Take the time to have a real conversation with the person about, you can share with them your impressions of Brazil so far, if you had been to Brazil before, or if it's your first visit. Ask them whether they've been to the U.S. before. Kind of take the time to get to know them before you talk about business.
I have another one kind of on the cultural aspect, Emily, and that is that I have heard that that the Brazilians pass out very little cups of coffee many times before a meeting or during a meeting. What if I don't drink caffeine?
Okay. That's a very good question. It is customary for people to serve coffee and to serve water during meetings, so it'll be either before the meeting or after. If you don't drink coffee, it's fine to not accept the coffee. You can always ask whether they have tea, or if you would just prefer to not have anything or just have water, you can always ask for that. People don't take it as an offense. It's not. I know in some cultures to turn it down is very, some people take it personally, but over here it's, if you're offered the coffee and you don't want to drink it, you don't drink caffeine, or, for whatever reason, you can just tell them, no, thank you, can I have some water instead, that kind of thing.
Thank you. Any other?
But don't pound the pão de queijo.
We do have a question from the phone. Juan, your line is open.
Thank you. Ms. Bastian, a question. You showed a chart of showing flat exports from Brazil versus rising imports in Brazil. And now in the last approximately 6 months, there has been a significant devaluation of the Brazilian real. Which makes their exports more interesting rather than our exports to them. What is your take on this, and do you see a worsening of this financial crisis or not?
I think that what we're seeing is a cyclical thing with the how the real has devalued. We will see some increase in exports from Brazil to the U.S. I think that the difference in what the U.S. buys from Brazil versus other trading partners with Brazil is that what Brazil exports to, let's say, China and Russia, is just commodities. So natural resources, they just export these raw materials, really. In the U.S., we are importing some commodities, but also some light manufacturing, services, that kind of thing. And so the Brazilians really value our trade relationship, and so there will definitely be more definitely more sales from Brazil to the U.S., but at the same time, there will also be more sales from the U.S. to Brazil, just because there's a lot of interest in the products that the U.S. market has to offer. So I wouldn't say that it's a financial crisis. I wouldn't characterize it as that. I would just say that this is a cyclical thing, and that it's only natural that as our trade relationship grows, there will be times when Brazil's exports to the U.S. do increase.
Thank you very much.
Oh, sure, you're welcome.
This time, then, I would, of course, you have Yamali's contact information, and you can always contact Les Wilgus or myself here in the St. Louis office. And if you're not in St. Louis, feel free to contact one of your local trade specialists. You can find our offices at our main website, which is www.export.gov, and go to the location section, and you can find your local office via city, as well as all of our overseas offices. And at this time, I'd like to get back to Les so that he can wrap up our program for today.
Thank you, Margaret and Yamali. This concludes this program with the reminder to watch our other videos in this series, and feel free to contact the U.S. Commercial Service for any further information. Contact information can be found off the main page of export.gov. Near the top of the page is a tab for locations. Select domestic or international to find your local office. Thank you.